Do your cells look sad, small, and weak instead of the robust attention grabbers they're supposed to be? My name is G, and I've taught fluid art to over 3,000 students, and many of them are achieving the results that they hope for within their very first attempt, and I can help you get to that level as well. Basically, fluid art is exactly like baking. Do you know how some people find baking super easy and other people think baking is the hardest thing in the world? It really just comes down to how well you can follow instructions. If you can follow instructions to the letter and use the ingredients you were told, baking is simply throwing stuff in a bowl, then throwing that stuff in the oven, and then coming back after a certain amount of time, and it's ready. But if you can't follow instructions, baking is a nightmare where the dough is either too wet, too dry, too sticky, burnt on the outside, and raw on the inside. It's not ideal. Only people that understand what eggs, flour, and butter do in baking can improvise. Likewise, only people that actually understand what painting materials do are able to reliably improvise. So the main reason your cells don't look the way you want them to is you follow recipes from people without actually understanding what the materials do. And this leads you to take liberties like changing materials and components without knowing what the implications of doing that are. If you're new to this channel, my name is G and I make fluid art tutorials with a heavy focus on science. If you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button. So this is what you actually need to know. There is no best way to make cells. There's a correct way to make cells for the technique. And not every technique is meant to have cells. So first you need to identify what the actual type of cell that you like is. Is it these round cells that you normally find with oils? Is it these cells that are surrounded by a web-like pattern called lacing? Or is it these really fluffy, puffy looking clouds? Each of these has a set of ingredients and the method to create them. Having the recipe by itself without understanding how you're supposed to use it is like having a baking recipe and not knowing how hot to set the oven or how long to bake it for, right? It just doesn't work. So now that you know what the types of cells are, now you need to know what the ingredients you need to make them. Round cells are typically made with silicone oil or another oil that has a silicone compound in it, right? Silicone oil is just the most popular. When you use it, you're typically using a medium consistency, which is somewhere in the range of 2 parts pouring medium to 1 part of acrylic paint. You add 1 single drop per cup of color and you mix it in. And I cannot stress this enough. More is not better with silicone oil. Clouds are produced with a specific enamel paint and soft body acrylic paint combo. The most popular combo is the Deco Art Satin Enamel and the Artist Loft Soft Body. When you use this recipe, it's typically also at a medium consistency, but I've seen different artists use different recipes, so I don't typically consider this technique standardized in consistency, right? You can get different results at different consistencies. Lacing requires Amsterdam paint. It's typically mixed in a recipe, the most famous of which is called a cell activator, where you use 3 parts of Australian Floetrol to 1 part of acrylic paint. But a lot of people don't really understand this. It's actually the acrylic paint that causes the effect, not the Australian Floetrol. Which means you can substitute the Australian Floetrol for any number of things, including pouring medium alternatives like the other Floetrols and Oatrol, and even just water. If you're enjoying my science-based teaching style and you're ready to start making paintings that you absolutely love, check out the self-paced programs I prepared for beginners in the pinned comments below. So now you know the different cell types and the ingredients you need to prepare them. Now we'll cover how to actually use them. In this video, I'll focus on silicone oil because it's the most available, it's the easiest to use for a beginner, and it's the easiest to grasp scientifically. So what are the properties of silicone? It's hydrophobic, it's non-flammable, it's clear colored, and it's less dense than water, right? So when you mix it into a color, what you're doing is you're breaking up that one droplet into many smaller droplets. It kind of resembles when you have grease floating on the surface of soup. That's pretty much what happens in a painting. The oil rises to the surface and it floats on top of the painting. But here's the catch. The oil doesn't use some sort of magic to turn into colorful cells. What the oil actually does is it's rising to the surface and displacing paint in the process as it's doing so. When it gets to the surface, it's still clear colored because it doesn't actually mix with the water-based paint, right? So when it gets to the surface, what it's doing is it's providing you with a window into the color underneath. That's what the oil is doing. It's showing you the color underneath. So what this means is when you use silicone oil, your colors must overlap in order for the oil to show you a different color. If you just have solid colors, what the oil will be doing is showing you the same color it's already in. It won't look like anything. So here's a demonstration. I'll use glue all as the pouring medium. We're going to mix it with water at a 70 to 30 ratio by weight. So 70% glue, 30% water. This is now our pouring medium. We will mix all the paints in 2 parts pouring medium to 1 part paint ratio. Okay? Everything, all the colors, the base, everything will be mixed with this recipe. And you'll add 1 single drop of silicone oil to the colors. That means everything excluding the base. Now we're going to do the swipe technique, which is literally taking 1 or more colors and overlapping them with the rest, which is perfect for what we need the oil to do. See how nothing happens at first? This is actually caused by the pouring medium, not the silicone oil. And I'll address this in a few seconds. So what we need to do is apply heat. We're going to use a kitchen torch or a heat gun. On its lowest setting, you don't need a lot of heat, it's just some amount of heat. And this will bring the drops of oil to the surface. And that's what you're seeing now, and we call cells. It's a transparent drop of oil that rolls through the paint, and you're seeing through it. So what else do you need to take into account? The brand of paint and which pouring medium you're using. You need to take this into account whenever you're following a recipe. The reason is different brands of paint don't come in a standardized viscosity. Viscosity means how dense the paint is right out of the container. If the different brands of paint don't have a standardized viscosity and you're not using the same brand of paint as the recipe you're following, chances are the recipe will come out either thinner or thicker than intended, right? Same applies for the pouring medium. Different pouring mediums have different properties. Floetrol and Oetrol are paint conditioners that help the paint self-level, whereas glue is very elastic and it dries a lot faster than Floetrol does. What this translates to in cells is when you use silicone oil with Floetrol, cells will be able to get to the surface much faster and won't require any heat because they travel through the Floetrol easy. Whereas when you use glue, the cells have a harder time traveling through the glue because it's a lot more elastic and has higher surface tension, that you need to apply heat using a kitchen torch or a heat gun to bring the cells to the surface. Generally, what this translates to is cells are a lot looser, they're easier to form, but they don't retain their shapes as well when you use Floetrol, whereas in glue, they're harder to form, but once you form them, they tend to hold their shapes a lot better, right? To the untrained eye, though, this may look like the Floetrol is what's producing the cells. But the reality is, Floetrol is never responsible for the cells. Look me right here. Floetrol is never responsible for the cells. It's just a paint conditioner. It creates conditions that make the cells forming and reaching the surface a lot easier. But you can form all 3 types of cells that I mentioned in this video without ever using any Floetrol. If you've been enjoying this video and my style of teaching, please consider subscribing to this channel. I would appreciate it very much. And if you want to take the plunge and learn fluid art in a very organized and detailed and structured manner, and a very science-based approach that I take in all my teaching, check out the online courses. They're in the description box below and in the pinned comment. So you've learned about using silicone oil. If you want to keep going and try this technique in a more detailed video, check out this video right here. If you want to take the next step and learn about lacing, check out this video right here. And if you're still unsure about your brands of paint and the pouring medium and how they impact your results, this video is for you. This is G. Thank you for watching.